Research that resonates.
Schweizer has not been wrong on any of his years and years of reporting on the Bidens.
Investigations that matter.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. But that's, I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
The only entities, the only people that would report on this, and Peter Schweizer, who deserves a Medal of Freedom, in my view.
This is The Drilldown with Peter Schweizer.
Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to The Drilldown, where we relentlessly expose cronyism, corruption, and the abuse of power in Washington, D.C. The co-host of the program, Eric Eggers. We've got big news.
Big news. We were prepared to do this podcast on, ironically, the charges facing Hunter Biden without knowing what the verdict was going to be, because the point we want to make is it's not actually about the verdict, but we do now know about the verdict, and that's pretty newsworthy itself.
It is. Literally broke about 30 minutes ago from the time we're doing this podcast. Guilty on all three charges. He faces potentially up to 25 years in jail. There will certainly be an appeal, but this is a huge case. We want to unpack the case, but talk about the larger aspect of it, right? Because this is one small component in the larger nature of what Hunter Biden was doing. And that brings me to an analogy.
Uh-oh.
And I want to ask you a very specific question.
I get very nervous when you break out your analogies.
Yeah, sometimes they work, sometimes
most
they don't.
of them are wildly inaccessible.
Yeah,
but,
so
okay.
So to me, this is the equivalent of somebody goes out and robs a bank, and then they're fleeing the scene, and a cop pulls them over for a speeding ticket. Mm-hmm. And they're issued the speeding ticket, and the bank robber goes to court to contest the speeding ticket. In other words, I think that this is sort of a charge that I'm glad the charge was brought. I think it's important because he violated the law, but I think it's really a distraction from the larger scheme of things. And I imagine you probably had some run-ins when it comes to tickets as well, right?
I mean, let's just say I like to pull a few strings, even when I've been pulled over on occasion.
I bet.
I've been pulled over, I think, for valid reasons, and I've been let go for what I would also consider to be valid reasons. I'm sure Hunter Biden's looking for the latter. The only thing I'll say about your analogy, which is not bad, it's pretty good.
All right.
It's let's assume that the media coverage then is not about the bank robbery, but it's all about the speeding ticket. Was he speeding? Was he not speeding? Was his window down? Well, he's looking at Spotify. How could he be responsible for abiding by the law?
Right.
But I'd also say I don't think it was a bank robbery. I think it was more like he and his family made a deal with the bank that they got access to lots of money in exchange for zoning protocols and other favors they did for the families of the people that run the bank. I mean, that's what we're actually talking about. And that's why, while it's, I don't think it's something to celebrate per se, it's never a good deal if somebody goes to prison. By the way, as an aside, I was going to ask you, how many people do you know that have been sentenced to prison? I'm 43. It's now not a small number.
You run with a faster crowd.
No, I'm saying it's people I've learned for this job.
Yeah. We do have that effect. That effect. There's no question about that. And look, I think this case is an important one because we have to remember, I would argue justice is being done here, but justice is not being done in this case by the Department of Justice.
That's right.
Because let's remember, about a year ago, DOJ and the defense attorneys, Hunter Biden's defense attorneys, essentially conspired to kill this deal, to kill this case off.
Right.
In other words, argue nobody would actually, actually be charged. The jury wouldn't find people guilty in this case. And it was only this heroic judge in Delaware who stood up and said, wait a minute, you can't do this. You can't shut this down. So justice has been done not by the Department of Justice, but by a jury in Delaware that, by the way, that was subjected to the full charms of the Biden family. Jill Biden showed up, for example, other Biden family members, to try to carry the flag in Delaware. It doesn't seem as if that flag went very far in this case.
It doesn't seem like it went very far in this case. And we should talk, because what you just said is actually the point, right? The point isn't that Hunter Biden was found guilty, but I think the fact that he was found guilty is surprising and noteworthy. It's worth pointing out Jill Biden, his mother, who has been at the trial quite often, wasn't there. This wasn't something that I think they were necessarily expecting so quickly. David Weiss, the guy who actually eventually, after his original plea deal was rejected by that judge, as you noted, who brought the charges, he wasn't even there. So it's kind of like, hey, then the judge was like, hey, well, here we go.
Yeah.
So they're ready to go. It's also, by the way, worth pointing out, and I know I told you this earlier, Axios, in an article about the charges and the conviction, said, in just a note about the trial, said many members of the Biden family, including Jill Biden, attended the courthouse during the trial. This is the point that you should pay attention to. Often wearing designer outfits and carrying expensive handbags, at odds with the Biden working class image and contrasted with the more modest apparel of the jurors. That's actually the point. The point isn't, does Hunter Biden have a drug problem? Did he lie on the form? Although I will say this, no one takes gun paperwork as seriously as Peter Schweizer. The only thing you take more seriously than gun paperwork is actually rental car agreements. And that's,
Well, no, I think they're real, because you're talking about, a firearm. I own a lot of firearms. I believe in the Second Amendment. But, do you really want actually people that are high on drugs able to buy these things regularly? And I know that people can poo-poo it. Oh, it's a form. And, but the point is, you have to have some way of kind of restricting. The form also asks you, are you a felon?
Yeah.
Felons are not allowed to own firearms.
Well, he is now.
Yeah, he will be, and we'll see what happens in the appeal.
So on the timing thing specifically, just because you mentioned the Second Amendment, it's worth pointing out that Hunter Biden's defense included, I think, a Second Amendment argument, right?
Yeah, robust Second Amendment, and there are claims that they're going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. The argument's going to be essentially that drug addicts have Second Amendment rights as well. That just because you're taking drugs, you should not be denied access to firearms, which is rich with irony, given that the Biden administration wants to take firearms away from sober-minded Americans in the name of reducing violent crime.
To the point, today is Tuesday, June, whatever it is. I think it's the 9th. No, it's the 11th.
Yeah.
It's June 11th. Later today, like at 1:30 this afternoon, it's like an hour from now, Joe Biden is expected to talk about his administration's efforts to prevent gun violence.
Yeah.
Talk about this Safer Communities Act. And he's going to talk about how they've charged more than 500 defendants for violating gun trafficking and other gun provisions. And the quote from his spokesperson says, gun violence is an issue that requires real leaders who aren't afraid to stand up to the gun lobby. So it's just ironic that they're out there anti-gun lobby talk. It's different in the sheets than in the streets, as they say.
It is indeed very, very different. So the details of this case are pretty clear. It seems like Abby Lowell and the defense team didn't even really argue the facts. And the facts were pretty remarkable, and I think indicate, again, kind of the stupidity of the Biden family, because what they essentially did was
so good.
Hunter, bought this firearm, said on the form that he was not taking drugs, he was not addicted to drugs.
Check a box like
and
that.
And then he literally wrote a memoir about his drug addictions, and he, of course, left that laptop in Delaware with all that evidence. And of course, one of the things that came out in the case is, yes, the laptop is genuine. We've known that for more than 4 years, but all of that is clear. So it laid the framework. So it's pretty clear. There was evidence in forms of witnesses, Hunter's own words and his memoirs, that he actually was taking drugs actively at the time that he claimed that he was not. And the defense position was basically to look at sympathy on the court. To say that, poor Hunter.
Which is why all the Bidens showed up at the courthouse, right?
Yeah.
In Wilmington, like, hey, this is Biden territory, this is Biden country. Trump can't post on social media because he's accused of voter intimidation.
Right.
But everybody that's connected to the Bidens can show up in their hometown to sit in the courtroom to remind the juries who they are. The prosecutor even had to say to the juries, the people in the courtroom are not evidence.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Don't look at them.
Yeah.
Right? Let's focus
Yeah.
on the facts. The facts, by the way, include that he owned this gun for 11 days. He purchased crack cocaine regularly, according to the prosecutors, and the gun was later found in his car with drug paraphernalia and discarded in a trash can outside a supermarket.
Yeah, near a school, across the street from a school. By the way, this brings me to a larger point, and I think this is the thing we really need to concentrate on. Beyond this case, there's so many other larger issues, but there's got to be a Biden parlor game that they play, which is Hunter an addict? Is Hunter not an addict? Because you remember when the first details came out of his business dealings overseas, their defense was, no, he's a serious businessman. What are you talking about? Of course, he, legitimate deals. Then when it came out that he was, of course, lying about things, he was making claims about his father, then it was, he's a hopeless drug addict. He doesn't know what he's doing. They seem to have reverted to that in this particular case, again, arguing he's a hopeless drug addict. You can't hold him in account for what he's done. So it seems that they shift and emphasize whether Hunter is, almost totally immobilized by drugs, or whether he is a legitimate, smart, savvy businessman, depending on the context of the case.
Depends on what his lawyer's advice is on the day.
Exactly right.
Yeah, he likes to get a little zooted, but that doesn't stop him from brokering deals in Ukraine, and like he can meet with Russian oligarchs and help make sure that different Mexican officials have access to the White House. And oh, by the way, you have a Chinese venture capital deal. Hunter's the guy you want for that.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right, because he's sober-minded.
No, sober-minded. I know it's embarrassing on its face, but the larger point is, it proves that Hunter Biden is who we've always said he was, and I think more importantly, there's now tax charges. Those are much more interesting from a national security standpoint, because that involves actual money that may be related to Joe, and Joe is adjacent to those business deals. That actually matters more from why does Hunter Biden matter in the news? Like there's that story. But then the larger story that this represents today, and you already said it, is that justice wasn't done by the Department of Justice, but in spite of the Department of Justice. Because the larger context is, you've got Trump's been convicted 34 times. The prosecutors of Trump are paraded around on the red carpet. You've got Joe Biden begging the New York Times, or begging Merrick Garland through the New York Times to prosecute Trump for 2 years.
Right.
And then you've got his guys, the Department of Justice, trying to work with Hunter Biden's attorney to make this go away last summer.
Right, exactly. So again, this is the concern, this is the frustration that a lot of people have about our criminal justice system. It's not in the jury system per se. It's in the process going up to a trial. And so if you look in Trump's case, for example, and of course, Trump's case and Hunter Biden's cases are both going to be appealed. So that's clear. But in Trump's case, it's pretty clear. Alvin Bragg, let's say, used some very creative and curious legal tricks.
At the state level.
At the state level to bring these cases. Even the CNN legal analyst who used to work with Alvin Bragg said they've never seen anything like this. This is highly unprecedented. They essentially had these misdemeanors, these record-keeping laws that applied to the state of New York, claims that they were involved in the abetting of a felony, which then makes those misdemeanors felony, but they didn't really reveal what the underlying felony was to the jury. So that
didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, exactly. So that case is going to be appealed. This case is going to be appealed, I'm sure the Hunter Biden case, but it brings us to this larger question, the analogy that I used earlier, which is, somebody robs a bank, then they get the speeding ticket, and everybody's talking about the speeding ticket. Let's talk about the bank robbery, or as you talked about, the looting of the bank with the help of some of the bankers. There are a whole host of charges that Hunter Biden has not faced and will not face, likely because the DOJ gummed up the works. We know, for example, the FARA violations, right? The Foreign Agents Registration Act. You can go through the list of, Senator Menendez, the case right now against him, the Elliott Brody case, the Paul Manafort case, all of these cases involving FARA, where I would argue Hunter Biden's violations are much more clear-cut than any of those were. He was never charged in those cases, and the statute of limitations on a lot of those cases have run out. The tax cases, right? We know he's going to be charged in Los Angeles. He's going to be facing a trial there. But even some of those charges, they let the statute of limitations run out. So my point is we're all focused on this speeding ticket, and the fact that the jury has said, no, you were speeding. You were going 45 in a residential 30 zone. The larger crimes he has avoided because our criminal justice system is not focused on justice. It's focused on covering up and protecting certain people while at the same time weaponizing the system against others.
I'll do you one better. It's almost like my man was speeding with reckless abandon and, probably inebriated and under the influence of a number of substances, but he got pulled over for a tag light violation, which, by the way, I have been pulled over for tag light. I think it was a case of racial profiling. You can judge from that what you like about the car I was driving at the time. I think that's actually why I was let go.
What were you driving?
It's a beat up old red Mustang.
Oh, yeah. They said this guy's too poor.
I don't know. We'll leave that. That's a different podcast for a different day. But the point would be that the point you make about the FARA agent registration is really good, Because, remember, that was actually what scuttled this deal. We're actually here today because, we're here today being the fact that Hunter Biden has been found guilty on 3 different charges because this judge, U.S. District Judge Mary Ellen Noriega, said, hey, well, what happens? Okay, I get that you have this plea deal and you want to, the deal was really good, right?
They were sweetheart deal.
Sweetheart deal. Is going to plead guilty to 2 counts of not paying taxes and sense of probation. And then the gun thing would have gone away if he stayed sober for 2 years.
Magically disappears.
Yeah. So that was the deal that the U.S. Department of Justice and Hunter Biden's attorneys brought to this judge.
Yeah.
And the judge is like, okay, I don't love this. It seems a little weird. But let me ask you this. She goes, what happens if he has future charges of failing to register as a foreign agent? She literally asked these attorneys this question.
Yeah.
She goes, does this agreement prohibit him being charged for that? Which he, by the way, has admitted to being guilty of in emails. But the defense said, oh, yeah, we believe it would prohibit the prosecution of that. And the prosecution's like, no. If you're the prosecutor, even if you think that's true, you're not going to admit it to the judge in the court.
Right.
And then that was actually what led to this disagreement between these 2 lawyers. And then, as NBC News reported, we'll rip it up, most likely, the prosecutor said in this exchange, right? So the idea that he would still be found guilty of FARA violations and he wasn't protected from that is what caused this deal to not be enacted because the judge had the temerity to ask follow-ups.
Exactly, right. And God bless that judge, and God bless this jury, and God bless these prosecutors who I think did a good job in sort of laying out the facts. But to your point, there are so many unanswered questions involving, I would argue, criminal behavior, FARA violations, for example. There's certainly, I think, things related to the bribery statutes that need to look at. We know that Joe Biden personally profited from this, and he helped engineer, I would argue, a lot of this because he could have shut down. The drug addiction stuff is different, but in terms of the actual profiting off of the family name, granting access to foreign nationals, including Chinese nationals, could have been shut down from day one by Joe Biden simply saying, son, I love you, but if you put me on the phone with a business partner or if you bring a business partner to the White House or the vice presidential residence, which we know he did, absolutely not, I'm shutting this down. He never said that. He never said that. He allowed that conduct to continue. So he is complicit, I would argue, in this behavior and an accessory to these crimes.
Instead, he was like, Brother Chang, how's it rolling?
Well, in the case of one of Hunter Biden's business partners, Joe Biden was reportedly on the phone. Hunter called with Yelena Baturina from Russia.
Yeah.
And the words from Joe Biden were, take care of my boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's reportedly what he told the Russian oligarchs. So that, to my case, these are the larger issues. I think the gun charges are important. I think these tax charges are important. But those are not going to act as a deterrent to cleaning up our political system. The way you do that is by actually bringing charges against people who are engaging in this kind of influence peddling, and I would argue bribery.
So let me ask you this, because, and by the way, I want to point out that you normally are very kind of humble and deferential, and people ask you to make predictions all the time, and you say, well, I'm not great at predictions. Sean Hannity yesterday on the radio asked you a prediction. You're like, oh, let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. So I'm just noting that your willingness to make predictions varies by format. So I'm interested to see what you'll say about this. It's been pointed out that the Department of Justice under Joe Biden has an opportunity to right the many wrongs that they are guilty of here, because you now have a criminal referral from Congress, from one of these oversight committees, for Hunter Biden specifically, that the Department of Justice could choose to act upon.
Yeah.
Do you think they will?
No.
Okay.
I think they will wait until after the election, and then I think whoever wins it will go away under the assumption that if Biden is president, reelected, that they protect him, or if Trump comes in, they'll punt and they'll leave it to the new administration. I think the other issue lingering out there, and I want to get your take on this, is because those criminal referrals are important, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know, for example, that Steve Bannon, who is the co-founder of this organization, is being sentenced to jail for defying Congress. He was subpoenaed, and he said, I'm not going to go. He said his lawyers advised him on that, but the judge says you're going anyway. In this particular case, these criminal referrals from the congressional committees involve James Biden and Hunter Biden, saying that they flat out lied under oath before Congress.
Which is different than not showing up. It seems like it would be worse.
Yeah, well, and but the point is they're both serious crimes,
yeah,
right, in the eyes of the code of the law. So they should actually be prosecuted. But I think, again, I have very little confidence in DOJ. The only reason this gun case case and the tax cases are proceeding is because of the deep embarrassment they had from this judge up in Delaware. But here's the larger question.
Uh-oh.
Joe Biden has gone on record and said he will not pardon Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is yet another Biden lie? Do you think that after the election, whether win or lose, do you think that he will pardon Hunter?
Yet another Biden lie. Are you suggesting that Joe Biden has been anything but precise and accurate and truthful when it comes to his relationship with his son, his knowledge or lack thereof of the business deals, the conversations he hasn't had with Hunter Biden about those business deals? Right, because obviously Joe Biden has lied at every turn about everything that he's had to do with Hunter Biden. So the question is the fact that he said he will not pardon Hunter Biden another untruth? I think it depends on the election results.
Okay. So
right?
let's say if Trump wins.
Oh, he's definitely going to pardon him.
He's definitely going to pardon him.
Right? Because if Trump wins, then it's like, which by the way, just it's worth pointing out, like so you mentioned Steve Bannon and the fact that the co-founder of this organization is going to prison. Like, you talk about a wild time at GAI. Like, we're there. We work on this book, Clinton Cash, and then Steve Bannon joins the Trump campaign, and then the revelations of Clinton Cash, which we think actually exposes a lot of significant wrongdoing, right? Unethical behavior, everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, that gets used in the campaign. Hillary's ethical kind of vulnerabilities are the number one thing that cost her, by all accounts, in the election. It's one of the reasons why they came out with the fake Russian dossier.
Right.
I mean, the point is, like, we were having a moment, and all this stuff was all over. It was the New York Times, Bloomberg, everywhere. And then Trump wins, and they're chanting, like, lock her up.
Right.
Like, you've got, and then she's not treating classified emails. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there with Hillary.
And this is, I mean, you raise an important point here, by the way. Trump was president, and Trump there was a statement he issued early on saying, look, there's nothing to be gained by charging my political opponent.
But they said, oh, you can't elect that guy because he's going to put political opponents in jail, right? So what I'm saying, and like, you had the crowd, like that was the thing. That was a real concern for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And now look what's happening. I mean, it's crazy.
It is. It's the opposite of what they said was going to happen.
Yeah.
Is happening. They are now trying to, of course, put Trump into jail. So you think if Trump wins,
then he will pardon him.
100%. If he wins re-election, you think he will not pardon him?
I think he will not pardon him. I don't think he'll have to pardon him.
You don't think so? You think you think a court will overturn the decision,
or they're just kind of like, I think there's a legal argument to be made that this is a nonviolent offense, it's a first offender.
Right.
You know, that they can come up with some light sentencing that way.
Yeah.
And that the PR backlash of a pardon can be avoided and keep still Biden's out of jail.
But here's the question. I mean, honestly, I think regardless, he is going to pardon Hunter. Okay. After the election, he will pardon him.
You're a much better father than me.
Well, I think it fits the pattern, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly sees his son as a victim, even in the foreign deals that he's doing, even when he's profiting off a family name, bringing these guys in to meet with him. He clearly thinks he's a victim. But also, what backlash?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where's the media been on any of the Hunter Biden stuff? The fact that Joe has lied. My son got no money from China.
Yeah.
BS. I never met with any of his business partners. BS. I mean, but there's no fallout from it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a guarantee after Election Day, regardless of who wins, Joe Biden is going to pardon Hunter Biden, and it is going to be wrapped around the mantle of, we all know people that have substance abuse issues and they do terrible things. Hunter recognized what he's done wrong, and I'm going to pardon him.
That's one of those very few Peter Schweizer predictions.
Yeah.
So you can take it to the bank. Let's just hope it's a bank that's not being looted by the Biden family before Hunter then speeds away.
Exactly.
Only to be apprehended by those aggressive meter readers.
Exactly. Well, it is a crazy time
Yeah.
with our criminal justice system. We're going to continue to monitor this as we always have. There are, of course, going to be other Hunter Biden trials. We hope and believe that there's going to be more reporting coming out from the House Oversight Committee. And this, I think, is having a very tangible effect on the way people view Washington and the way business is being done in Washington. We should take pride in the fact, for example, that the Bidens, in light of our reporting in 2019 and 2020, came out and said there will be no foreign business deals while Joe Biden is president of the United States, and I think we can take credit for that.
Let me ask you one follow-up to that. You've long said, this is one of those predictions that hasn't come true yet, but you've long said you think that there's a strong case to be made that Joe Biden will not be the nominee in September. Is the fact that you now have this very unique situation and the next pending trial for his tax charges coming up in September an excuse to have an off-ramp for 81-year-old Joe Biden?
It's a possibility. I think that For me, the issue is Joe Biden's health.
Yeah.
That's what I think would prompt him to step down. And let's remember, people are saying it's too late. They're stuck with Joe. No, really, going up to the convention, once you pass the convention, it becomes very, very hard to replace a candidate. But up until the Democrat convention, if Joe Biden were to decide to step down, those delegates to the convention, there could be a movement. They can pick essentially whoever they want as long as they're qualified to be the Democratic Party nominee. I still think it's a health question and issue. I think some of the latest incidents are just further indications that his health is not good, and it's not going to get any better. But I think Joe Biden and Jill Biden, maybe even more importantly, right now are committed to staying on the ticket. But again, he could pardon Hunter, step down, have Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris or somebody else running the party.
In a serious way, you're a father, I'm a father, Joe Biden's a father. He's somebody who does appear to be in declining health, cognitively or physically or otherwise. Having your son sentenced to prison and found guilty of 3 felonies is not going to improve your health.
It's not.
I mean, that's going to have like a very real, I think, emotional and existential toll.
It is. And look, I mean, I understand it. I think he's made a lot of excuses for his son. Doesn't mean he needs to stop loving his son. But if he had dealt with this early on by laying down the law and saying, no, I'm not, don't put me on the phone with any of your, business partners. Good luck with whatever you're doing, but I'm not any part of it. He could have shut this down early. He chose not to. And by the way, this has been the Biden mode for decades. This is not a new a Hunter Biden, I'm on drugs, I need money phenomenon. So I think that's the larger thing that we need to keep in mind there. But, bottom line is it's going to be a wear and tear on him. I think the sentencing is going to happen approximately 4 months from now.
120 days.
120 days. So it's going to be interesting, and we're going to track that, and certainly it will be appealed. So we appreciate you, as always, listening to this podcast. You can find out more about our research at thedrilldown.com. You can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. And, of course, you can pick up his book, Fraud, on election fraud and election integrity. And you can also pick up my book, Blood Money, at Amazon and other fine locations as well. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.